What's going on, everybody, and welcome in to this edition of the Cards Hub Postgame Show. I'm Brenden Schaeffer, joined by Grant Salsman, and we are presented by Hot Shots here on the Cards Hub Postgame Show. And all the content, of course, on Sports Hub STL, presented by DraftKings. The crown is yours. Grant, touch and go there in the ninth inning for the Cardinals is Ryan Helsley. You know what? The Cardinals get the game to Helsley. That's been a problem for the bullpen recently, but did it this time. No problem. Had a 2-run lead. Save situation. Helsley comes in and didn't have his best stuff on the mound. Gives up the moonshot to Chourio to tie the game. And so you have to find a way to walk it off in the bottom of the ninth. And that's exactly what Nolan Arenado does. Is the Cardinals claim the series over the Brewers. They're going for the sweep tomorrow, but they know they've got at least 2 out of 3. And they've got a 10-4 record on the season at home. Grant, your early impressions of this one from the Cardinals, and get those comments in because we'll be reading them and we'll be talking about them here on the postgame show today. What are your thoughts on that one, Grant? Kind of a roller coaster, right, huh?
It was a roller coaster, and it just seems like what every Cardinals game has been. Even in the wins that feel comfortable, they find ways to make them a little nervy at the end. I was really happy to see Nats in the role that we did. Not only that, we saw him last time in the bullpen taking over for Palante, kind of the mop up 5th, 6th inning. He was in an important inning, the 7th inning. I think that's a really good spot for Mats. We've talked about that before. And then Baton came in, shut the door in the 8th as he does. And we saw the bad Helsley today. We haven't seen it often in the last year and a half, but we saw him not having control, which I think is the second time this season the lack of control has really come back to bite him.
I would agree with that. The time he blew the save where he threw just a bunch of pitches and walked several guys, and clearly just that day he didn't have a great feel for the fastball, which is a little bit reminiscent of what we saw at times from him last year when he was sort of pitching backwards. We'd seen him almost use the slider to set things up because he didn't really know where that fastball was going to go. He didn't have confidence in it. And it happened once earlier in the year. During that outing, the slider was also giving him trouble. It was backing up on him a lot. That's exactly the pitch he threw to Jackson Chourio. Tried to throw that little get-me-over slider. It backs up right into the wheelhouse of Chourio. He's ready for what's coming because I feel like, scouting report-wise, it's happened enough times the last couple of years with Helsley where teams might say, look, he's not afraid to try to get a slider over to get into a favorable count and then be able to go to work from there, and paid for it that time. Almost thought Bryce Terang was going to get him. Chourio definitely did. And so you're sitting there going, oh, boy, here we go again. But I thought the Cardinal lineup was relentless today. We talk about one aspect of the team needing to be able to pick up another aspect of the team, and that's exactly what we saw. We saw a pretty consistent effort from top to bottom for the Cardinal lineup today. Nootbaar, Contreras, Donovan, and Mason Wynn, all 4 of those guys batted in order after the first time through, 9, 1, 2, and 3, all going for multi-hit games in this one. Just some really impressive stuff from those guys. And then obviously Nolan Arenado saved the best for last with his big swing. I don't know where the Cardinals would be this year if Nolan Arenado had been traded. Like, that's what was supposed to happen. But if Nolan Arenado was not on this team, again, it's the butterfly effect. You don't know exactly what would transpire. But I can say pretty definitively, might not win today and probably don't win yesterday because of the great defensive play that he made. We knew this was always the case, that the St. Louis Cardinals are better when Nolan Arenado is on the team. But last couple of days in particular just kind of go to show you just how good he still is on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, I was expecting a kind of a comeback season from Arenado here this season. And so far we've seen that. And, maybe this team can just stick around long enough and Arenado can try to put them on their backs long enough that can carry them to wins and contention. And I think this team could be really fun with Arenado come July, August, if they're in contention.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like, okay, so the Cardinals win the game today. They improve the record to 12-15. They're now just a half game behind the Brewers, but they've got a long way to go to catch the Cubs, as we know. It's just going to be very interesting to tell. They have been playing a brand of baseball at home that I think that's what they want to embody. They want to be the team diving around, making a play in center field like Victor Scott II does, and then kind of swimming around on the ground afterwards, having fun with it, like the great play that he made today. They want to be making those clutch plays like Thomas Saggese makes at second base after the ball tips off of Sonny Gray's glove. He somehow, from his backside, his belly, as he rolls over, makes the throw back to the bag to get an out in an inning where they needed everything that they could get. Like, those margins in the 2025 Cardinals season, I think, are going to be slim. But making more of those plays than the ones that you let fall by the wayside really ends up being a brand of baseball that I think the Cardinals can endorse. The Cardinals want to become that type of team and embody that regularly. They're doing it at home right now. You can't do any more than you can do in a day like today when you're playing at home, and that's where you've succeeded and you're kind of riding the vibes. It's interesting, though, like we know the crowd isn't what maybe it will be later on in the summer if they continue playing good baseball, but they're still finding comfort there despite maybe having smaller crowds. It's clear that when they're playing at Busch Stadium, Grant, the Cardinals are becoming the type of team that they want to be. Then it's just a matter of doing it on the road as well if they're going to do what you mentioned and contend later on in the season.
Yeah, I saw a great tweet that the Cardinals are like a fringe bubble NCAA basketball team. They're great at home. They're great at home, struggle on the road, and I don't know what it is because, I guess you can say in baseball, especially in the regular season, how much difference really does home and away should it make? Like it really shouldn't be. The atmosphere shouldn't really affect you as much in the regular season. A lot of times crowds aren't what they are in the postseason. So I just don't know what it is. Like I don't have an explanation for what changes when this team goes on the road.
Yeah, and part of me just wants to insist that it's small sample size and that you go to some environments. They played at Boston. I think Boston, it could be one of the final four teams standing in baseball this year. Like in the American League, the Yankees are really good. I think the Red Sox could potentially win that AL East and find their way deeper into October. We'll see. The Mets, I certainly believe that about after the 4-gamer the Cardinals played in Queens. And you could tell through the TV and talking to some of the other reporters that were there on the road in that series, that place was rocking. Like you mentioned the environment in April. Yeah, it's not really supposed to pay dividends all that much. It's not like a home game for the Blues this weekend. It's April baseball. But in New York, where you're spending money and they're signing Juan Soto in the offseason and they're doing all these things to get the fan base energized, that place was a party for 4 straight days. And you see the benefit that can be derived from that. But on the flip side of that, the Cardinals were on the road in that environment. And so I'm looking at the Pittsburgh series. I think the Pirates probably stink outside of Paul Skeens. However, it was like 29 degrees when they're playing those games. Nobody wanted to be there. I'm not saying that's an excuse to explain why the Cardinals lose that series to a team that they're supposed to be better than. But you can just look at the number. There's only been a handful of road series so far this season, and an Atlanta Braves team that has stunk on the road but has played well at home. Like, the record is inexcusable if you're a contending team, but is it sticky? Is it one of those stats that's going to remain the case throughout the summer as you get more sample and more data points from other cities and you go to places where, those teams are maybe going to be going through the dog days of summer at some point? Yeah, I think the Cardinals are going to rebound a little bit and become closer to the team that they are on the road and have that be the team that they've been at home so far. But you also dig a hole. We've seen the Cardinals dig holes in recent Aprils and not be able to necessarily dig out of them. And so that's definitely something to be considered as well. Grant, we'll go to the comments here real quick. And your questions and comments and thoughts are always welcome here on Sports of STL. Make sure you hit that subscribe button to join the channel, and then you can get into the live chat. This question here talks about Gorman needing to go back to the minors for a while. I just want to add that that's not going to happen. And Gorman did have a double today. He's 1 for 3, reached base twice. The thing about Nolan Gorman is the same thing that it is for a guy like Jordan Walker, the same thing that it is for Lars Nootbaar, which nobody's talking about, taking Lars Nootbaar out of the lineup right now. But this was supposed to be the season for guys like that we've seen in fits and starts in recent years, what they're capable of in St. Louis. But now we need to see it in a consistent manner. And whether it comes in April or not, they're getting that chance in May. They're getting that chance in June, July. And you're seeing this through because that's what the transition year is about. That's what kind of finding out what is this next core of the St. Louis Cardinals. Along the way, there is room, in my opinion, for this Cardinals team to be pretty compelling, to be pretty fun, and maybe win a good number of ball games too. But there are some non-negotiables involved in this. And you cannot treat it like it's a normal St. Louis Cardinals season. If you're a fan out there saying, well, Nolan Gorman's struggling, got to bench him. Nolan Gorman's struggling, you got to send to the minors. Jordan Walker, it's very difficult right now for Oliver Marmol to find spots for a guy like Thomas Ajacci, who makes a big play today that helps the Cardinals win this game. But that's essentially what happens is, all right, make it a different situation for Jordan Walker. You find a way to give him a day in the midst of some struggles, and that allows for Ajacci to be able to play second. You move Donovan to the outfield. It's not going to happen necessarily every day. It's going to be very difficult to see how a guy like Ajacci gets involved regularly, and I agree with it because Jordan Walker, after a day off, needs to be back in there for the next 3. They've got to find a way. It's Gorman and Walker first and foremost right now are the two guys where you go, we still haven't seen it consistently, but they're 24 years old, 22 years old, guys that the Cardinals need to know, not just for this year, but for the years to come. What are these guys and how can we factor them into our plans? That's how I see it, Grant. And I think that's how the Cardinals do as well.
Yeah, I think so too. I think what frustrates fans with Gorman is, he has that double, draws a nice walk, and then he just puts together two really uncompetitive at bats. I think it was the at bat against Urube in the sixth, runners on base, and he three sliders, sinkers, whatever they were, off-speed pitches come out of the pitcher's hands and same swing on all three pitches. I think that's what's frustrating is one, he looks like two different players from at bat to at bat. And that's part of the reason why the Cardinals are giving him all these at bats though, is can he find the consistency? If he finds the consistency, he'll be really good. If he doesn't, he's not on the team next year in the coming years. And I think that's what they're trying to figure out. That's why it's a transition year. That's why they keep dubbing it this.
Yeah, I would agree with that completely. Brian making the interesting point that once again, Helsley blows a save, but he gets the win in the same game. That's just the way baseball be sometimes. And I'm sure if you ask Ryan, he would prefer the save than the blown save / win combination because it takes a lot of pride in being that closer that can come out and get the job done. But maybe he was just setting up Nolan Arenado for his moment in the sunlight, right? Gets a chance in the bottom of the ninth inning to walk it off. There's always a little bit more energy behind a win like that. Last night they had a win where they played it kind of wire to wire, tightrope game. They win it 3-2. Maybe today they thought they had to mix it up a bit. I don't know. As long as they're getting the wins at home, I think nobody's going to complain. Allison mentioning no everyday heat today, but still a win is a win. Yeah, it was kind of interesting to hear from Kyle Leahy actually last night in the Cardinals clubhouse about just being that guy that takes the ball no matter the circumstances and takes pride in being available, but he's not a guy that has a whole lot to say, kind of a little more on the shy side and just goes out there and gets the job done. I think that's part of what maybe makes Kyle Leahy a guy with just that steady, slow heartbeat that doesn't get phased by the big-time situations. And I can tell you who likes that is a manager of a player like that can be called upon in those spots. But you mentioned it, Grant, even though he was not part of the bridge to Ryan Helsley today, we still look at that bridge and I think feel some pretty good things about it. Steven Matz came on, got his job done for the most part. Riley O'Brien had to come in for one out to finish that seventh inning, but Baton had a clean inning, and that's really what you're looking for, I think, recently. Obviously, the Helsley thing will be what it is, and we'll see if he's able to bounce back at his next look. I do want to make note, this was a back-to-back. It's his first back-to-back since March 31st and April 1st when he went 2 days in a row for the Cardinals. Historically, we have seen Ryan Helsley not be quite as sharp, not quite as effective in that second day of a back-to-back. So I just want to mention it so that people kind of keep that in mind when 2 weeks from now you're going, why isn't Ryan Helsley throwing back-to-back? There's going to be times where I think the Cardinals are just going to get more out of him using him in the way that they are. And it's okay to feel a certain way about that, but I also think at a certain point, look, not every player is going to be a player that is a first ballot Hall of Famer. They've got no flaws and they're the perfect baseball player, right? Ryan Helsley is a very good baseball player. But if the Cardinals recognize, hey, this is an area in which we don't always get as much out of him when we use him in this fashion, I think the best teams and the best management groups will say, here's how we need to construct his opportunities to make sure we get the most out of him. Now, obviously, 2 save situations in close games back-to-back, he's the guy that goes in there, and that's going to be the case moving forward as well. But just something to note in those times where you're trying to maybe force as a fan base, here's what they need to be doing with Ryan Helsley. Sometimes the team might know better than we do on the outside. It's just all I want to say about that. But Grant, your thoughts on just the way that they handled the 7th and 8th inning today. No Leahy, got him a rest that he certainly needed, but found a way. Baton going back-to-back. Maybe the bullpen is starting to turn a corner a little bit in the names that are leading up to Ryan Helsley in the 9th.
Yeah, I love Matz. As I think we've talked, I think Matz is the third most reliable pitcher out of this bullpen. I would put Helsley and Baton above him, but I love using Matz in the 7th.
I think Leahy's number one at this point. I have to be honest with you. He's been unbelievable.
Yes, Leahy, I'll put Matz at 4th, but I think with Leahy being out today, I love using Matz in that 7th inning role. He runs into some trouble. You have a righty. I love that Marmol trusts O'Brien because we've seen Marmol struggle to trust players coming straight from the minors, and that was a leveraged situation, a 5-3 game.
It was.
Tying run at the plate, and Leahy gets the out, or O'Brien gets the out, pardon me. that's a perfect situation to use him. Good matchup, got him out, and then Tom went 30 pitches in yesterday's game, pitches a clean eighth, and you get to Helsley. That's what's important. Find ways to get to Helsley. If you lose games because of Helsley, you can live with it. I think what frustrates people is losing the games in the 7th and the 8th with the relievers. You can always live. If Ryan Helsley has the ball and you lose the game, you can live with that if you're Oliver Marmol and the Cardinals.
And we'll cross that bridge when we get to it if that's not the way we feel weeks down the road, if Helsley starts to hit a rough patch in multiple games in a row. But for right now, that's absolutely the way, because the frustration with the losing skid that they had on the last road trip was the fact that you never got to Helsley. Like, you never got to a situation where you even got to find out if he was going to get the job done or maybe have a rough patch and blow the game. It's that allure of the unknown where you're like, well, that guy's automatic in the way that we think about him as such a good reliever as he's been. To not be able to get any of those games to him to set up that advantage for your team was frustrating. So the 7th inning, the 8th inning, important innings. We're not talking about the 6th inning, though, Grant. That's because the Cardinal rotation has done an unbelievable job. And I jumped the gun. Talk rotation, we'll do it. I just want to make sure to highlight one more time this comment from Farmhands talking about Maton. That's a cautionary tale a little bit to me, because they had to give Maton that day off on Wednesday, I believe it was, in Atlanta. He had pitched Monday, didn't pitch Tuesday, but they still wanted to keep it away from him on Wednesday so that he could also take the day off of Thursday, because at that point, the Cardinals were 10-15. They'd played 25 games. Maton had pitched in 13 of the 25 team games, despite really having no spring training. The Cardinals wanted so desperately to ramp him up slowly. The circumstances have necessitated that they couldn't. They couldn't afford to. He's a veteran who, of course, every day is going to come in and tell Ollie Marmol, I want the ball. And at a certain point, you kind of have to protect players from themselves and say, we had a plan for this guy. We wanted to do it a little more slowly than this. And then at a certain point, game's on the line. Dude said he wants the ball. I have to give it to him in some of those spots where Marmol has, because you're trying to win these games. And that is a difficult balance. And so to the point that Redbird Farmhands made, that's something to keep an eye on. It's all the more reason, Grant, though, to your point, that you have to have guys like Riley O'Brien. They're out there available, just as Matt Sponson's been. I've seen a lot of comments already about, well, why aren't those other guys being trusted? It takes a little bit of a conviction from a manager to say, I'm going to start trusting these guys. Like Trevor talking about O'Brien, Sponson, when will they get a chance? Well, you saw the role that Riley could fill today. A little bit nervous because he's a guy with a walk rate, but he's also a guy with a strikeout rate. So if you need an out, he can come in and maybe be that fireman. We'll see if that's something that his personality is suited toward. We talk about the slow, steady heartbeat with Leahy. It'd be nice if O'Brien can settle into the old Leahy role, which was like more middle innings, but getting you out of some dangerous spots in the 5th or 6th when your starters don't go deep. As far as Sponson, Ollie's going to have to pick and find a spot for Sponson. They at a certain point, it becomes a big talking point because you haven't had the blowout situation where you'd like to use him, and day after day after day, he doesn't pitch. And so it's like, well, what's the benefit? Do they want to swap him for Roycroft, somebody that might be more trusted? Time's going to tell on that. But I did want to talk a little bit about the rotation, Grant. Your thoughts on what the starting pitching has done. Liberatore last night, Gray today. It's a consistent 6 innings from the majority of these guys, as we've seen in recent weeks. Not winning all these games because of other reasons, but that rotation has been, I think, exceeding expectations in just about every way.
Yeah, I think with Gray, what your ace is supposed to do is, even when he doesn't have his best stuff, get you a chance to win the game. You know, for 4 innings, Sonny Gray looked like he might go 8 innings in this game.
Yeah.
Obviously, in the 5th, it fell apart a little bit. Of course, you're going to trust him to go back out in the 6th. And I'm so glad that they let him finish that inning, let him get out of his own jam. Obviously, Sagasi made a really nice play there, but then he gets out of it with the fly ball. You'll take 3 runs, 6 innings from Sonny Gray every single day. You'll take it from all your starters, basically every single start. You're never going to complain about that. In a 5-0 game at one point, it does stink that it got to 5-3, and then you had to use some more high leverage relievers. But I'm very happy with what Gray has done in his last 2 starts. It's kind of been the same thing. He hasn't quite been that sharp for all 6 innings. He's found ways to give Cardinals chances and give Cardinals a chance to win. Liberatore, same thing. I mean, he was sharp yesterday, went 6 innings, and if you get that out of Libby, the Cardinals are going to be very, very happy about that. That could be the best thing to come from this season, is Matthew Liberatore really establishing himself as that 3rd, 4th starter for the Cardinals in the distant future.
Yeah, and maybe even beyond that. He's gone 6 innings in every start he's had this year, all 5 starts, 4 of which have been quality starts, if I'm not mistaken on that stat. He's just been really, really sturdy. And we got a chance to talk with him last night, and he talked about, look, this is what I've always dreamed of doing. I asked him, you've always had this confidence that you could do it, but how meaningful is it to do it? And he said, I grew up wanting to be in a big league rotation, and he's always, I think, viewed himself in that way, which is why he was pretty persistent when those conversations behind the scenes would happen about, starter, reliever, what is he? You have to credit Libby for sticking with it and believing in himself and then going out and doing it. And it's not like we're popping champagne over his head just yet, because as he said last night, it's early this year. Like, I've got to continue to do what I'm doing and building upon it. And so he's humble and recognizing of that. But at the same point, the Cardinals deserve some credit, because they could have easily sort of just catered to what we all thought might have been the case on the outside is, Libby sure looks good as a reliever. Maybe you stick him in that role. If they had done that and taken what arguably would have been the easy way out, the way out that there's no public scrutiny of put Libby in the bullpen because that's what everybody says you're supposed to do, because that's when we've seen him be at his best. If we would have seen that, well, we wouldn't be getting this from Matthew Liberatore, and the Cardinals wouldn't be getting that advantage. So it's also a great point from you, Grant, though, that it's a shame today. As much as 6 innings, 3 runs, I think you definitely do take. That's still 4.5 ERA, but within each game, that's a chance to win, and that's a chance to save your bullpen. 2 birds with 1 stone. The problem is that 5-0 lead. This could have been a day where O'Brien gets the 7th, Swanson gets the 8th and the 9th. If you're up 5-0 and then you find a way to make it 6 or 7-0, you save everybody for what's going to be a series finale tomorrow that you're trying to go for the sweep before heading back out on the road. Those moments where you do have to basically burn through every leverage guide, you have to go Maton back to back. Instead of this being a 6-1 Cardinals win where you used all of the B relievers, if you will, they used the A squad and barely escaped. It's great that they won, but we'll see if that shows up tomorrow. I do think that's particularly interesting. Get more of Grant's thoughts and more of your thoughts from the comments in just a moment. But first, I want to take a second to tell you that Sports Hub STL is brought to you by DraftKings. The crown is yours. And right now, with the NBA playoffs going on, you can turn your knowledge of NBA basketball or baseball, hockey, whatever's going on, into cash today. New players get $50 in Pick 6 credits instantly with just a $5 entry. And DraftKings Pick 6 is now available in Missouri. So download the DraftKings Pick 6 app now and use code STL Sports. That's code STL Sports for new customers to play $5, get $50 in Pick 6 credits. Better payouts, bigger win. Only with DraftKings Pick 6, the crown is yours.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 and over. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Pick 6 not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. 1 per new customer. Bonus awarded as non-withdrawable Pick 6 credits that expire in 14 days. Limited time offer. See terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promos.
We're getting a lot of comments still about the bullpen stuff, and I think we'll circle back to those. So keep them coming if you've got other thoughts to throw in there, live chat. But Grant, I want to ask you about this. Mason Wynn, batting 9th today, had a really good day. And there was a moment yesterday where I was kind of wondering if he was a little bit banged up again in the field and was kind of maybe trying to shake loose, but clearly nothing going on. He's in a great spot physically, and today was really good. And Chris mentions the line drive double to the opposite field needs to go viral with this club. Drive pitches away. Enough with flailing, and it was a good come from behind win. I think that's part of the Brant Brown philosophy this year, Grant, is don't be afraid to go the other way if that's what the pitcher is dictating. And I thought today, especially 9 through 3, I'm talking 9, 1, 2, and 3 in the lineup where they all had 2 hits. I thought that group did a really nice job of that today in particular.
Yeah, Mason Wynn, I mean, he had an 8-pitch at bat in that 8th inning or the 3rd inning that really kind of got things rolling for the Cardinals there offensively. Wynn, I think, really is comfortable in those deep, long at bats, kind of like maybe a Matt Carpenter of old. I know it's hard to compare those two, but he seems comfortable with 2 strikes, comfortable taking close pitches, knows the strike zone well. And I think you're going to see a lot more of that. I'm curious too, to that point of driving the ball the other way. I'm curious if we're going to see it a little bit more with Nolan Arenado. I feel like we've seen bits and pieces of, he's such a dead pull hitter. I feel like
you
that's
saw dead pull in the 9th inning, right?
Yes,
I didn't miss something. He pulled the homer that won the game.
I'm saying I wonder in that philosophy with the young guys if Brant Brown's going to push that on, and with Nolan, it's kind of like he's a Hall of Famer. He can kind of do what he wants. But
it's an interesting conversation.
Yeah.
Arenado has talked about in the past, and like we've heard it from the broadcasters, like, oh, when he's starting to go the other way, like he's really grinding out at bats and getting close. As a way to get out of a slump, if Arenado is in one, I'll have him hit the ball the other way. I want him to yank every fly ball like he did in the 9th inning today. I don't know if that's what he wants for himself. I think there are markers for his swing that when he's trying to find his way back from maybe not being in the best place, you start to see that come together with some hits the other way. But I like the swing I saw today in the 9th inning as well. Just saying, it is pretty good. He's a pretty good pull hitter when he's getting it going.
I agree. And we talked about, too, with this 9-1-2-3 with Wynn at 9, just kind of with Wynn and Herrera out for that period when they were both out, it felt like after the Cardinals were done with 4th, maybe 5th batter in the lineup, it was just kind of like, wow, these 6, 7, 8, 9, we have no chance. The Cardinals, they're probably not going to score. Got to get back to Nootbaar. And it felt like Nootbaar had to start everything. Have players on base for Lars and Donovan, guys that you feel pretty confident in to put the ball in play. I think you're going to see a lot of scoring. I think tread water, and then you get Herrera, maybe your best batter back. That the lineup really could take a turn for the better again, I think.
Here's the way I was thinking about this today, and somebody was asking me, why do they insist on Contreras still batting second? I'm like, well, first of all, he's on an 8-game hitting streak now. He was 2 for 5 today, 1,000 OPS over that stretch. He's going to be just fine. I might have been a little bit too eager when I said he's going to have a 700 OPS before the end of April. He's up to 594. If he hits a couple homers in Cincinnati, though, he very well could get there. But 8-game hitting streak, 2 hits today. I'll keep Contreras right where he is right now because things are working well. I'm not that worried about the batting order. But if at a certain point you do believe it benefits the team to have him a little bit lower and more of a consistent RBI spot, which to your point about Mason doing it from the 9-hole, kind of setting those guys up, suddenly that 2-hole becomes much more of an RBI spot than just whatever Lars Nootbaar happens to do in front of him. So that may be a difference as to why you really do think you're getting the most bang for your buck from Wilson in the 2-hole. But let me know in the chat if anybody agrees or disagrees with this. Herrera comes back. You maybe don't throw him right there immediately because he's going to need some time probably to get his swing back and to get lined in. But if you go Nootbaar, Herrera in the 2-hole, Donovan 3, Arenado 4, I'll go ahead and match up the right-handers 4-5. I'll put Contreras 5th, and then Gorman DHing batting 6th. 7th would be Walker, 8th Victor Scott, 9th Mason Wynn. That's about as balanced as you can be. You've got the left, right, left as close as it can. You match up Arenado and Contreras. I also think Contreras sometimes gets a good vibe going when he's batting behind Arenado. Something about that righty slugger in front of him maybe allows him to get a glimpse into what the pitcher's trying to do. I don't know, just kind of thinking on the fly on that one. I would really like that lineup, but like you said, Grant, they're doing some things right now with the way that the lineup is approaching things that you have to feel really good about today. I thought they were pretty relentless. I know it wasn't perfect. I know there were definitely some meat left on the bone in this one, but at the end of the day, I believe they were 4 for 9 with runners in scoring position today. You did leave 9 on base as a team, but pretty good outing for the offense. After yesterday, they mostly had to do it with base running to scratch off a few runs. Today, there was some timely hits and some power too. 5 doubles, I believe, as a team.
Yeah, and I look at the inning that got the Cardinals going. I think it was the Gorman double. Sagasi gets a productive out with a ground ball to the right side to advance Gorman to third, and Pages sack fly. Like, I know the sexy stuff is the home runs and the extra base hits and stuff, but getting a leadoff hit and turning that into a run with 2 outs is huge. I mean, 2 productive outs can score a run a lot of the times. And I think when the Cardinals are doing that, that's really when you see the offense start flying.
I agree with that completely. And there's not really much else to say right now about the offense. Like, you can look at, I saw a comment about Victor Scott, like, oh, he's 0 for 4. Every time I kind of get to thinking he might be a leadoff candidate, he kind of tapers off. And so JC was 0 for today, but did reach via that walk that we discussed. His OPS is still above 900. They'll find him the spots when they can, but remember, he's, as much as it kind of sounds crass to say, he's not the priority this year compared to a guy like Gorman getting in the lineup and Walker getting in the lineup. I think today was a day for Walker, but I don't think that's a trend. Even if JC had gone 2 for 4, you might have seen him out of the lineup tomorrow and Walker back in there. We've also seen Burleson, kind of a guy falling out of favor. He's more on the bench right now. that might be fine. You would like to see maybe, and that's another aspect of this. It's like, all right, if there are guys that are going to be bench guys, there are teams, and the Brewers are a good example of this, that will use their bench guys, and you're using 10, 11, 12 players in a game, maybe everybody but your backup catcher. And we don't really see the Cardinals recently doing that. They're kind of sticking with who they started with, which I think is situational and not necessarily the wrong call, because right now the reason that you're starting some of these guys is because that's who you've got the confidence in. In a case of like Burleson, hasn't necessarily been producing as much this year. The power hasn't quite been there for him. So is there a spot where you go, this is the spot we're waiting for to get Gorman, or pardon me, to get Burleson off the bench in a pinch hit opportunity? We'll see what that looks like. It's tricky. I think it's day to day, but I also think the backdrop of all of this is like Gorman's going to get those at bats, even if it's not always the best matchup, because that's what this season is about. So when people are like, the Cardinals don't want to win, they don't care about winning, that's not what this is. That are going to be taking a back seat to like the most optimal strategy in a given moment. And sometimes you may be rewarded for that because you find out more about a player through that process. I think that's kind of an interesting thing. I don't know if you have thoughts on that, Grant. That was just kind of my rant about it. It kind of is the way that I'm looking at it this year.
Yeah, I think, like, obviously if Gorman goes 0 for his next 40, like, they're not just going to say, hey, he needs to get the at-bats. But, like, as long as he's showing something, he's still going to get those at-bats. And he seems to be, like, the focal point of this from the fan point of view. Like,
it's him and Walker. I think it's kind of both, but Gorman maybe gets more of the bad pub because he's been around a little longer. I don't know.
Yeah, it feels like the fans, like, if you're upset as a fan about Gorman starting every day in this kind of transition period, you're upset at Gorman, it feels like. Why is Gorman? Like, he's the scapegoat. Even though I think you're right that Walker's in that circle as well. With Burleson, you know what you're going to get. Like, Burleson, if this team goes forward, either isn't on the roster or is kind of in the role he is now. Same with Sajaci. I think Sajaci is happy that he's on the MLB roster and playing a few times a week. Like, I think those are the roles these guys will have. I think with certain players, you're looking at, are they an Alec Burleson or are they our everyday outfielder, our everyday second, third baseman? You know, what is this for 2026 and going forward?
Yeah, and the problem is, and I love the comment from Farmhands here about sticking with who you're starting with also can help development, and that's kind of what the goal is, I think, here. But, like, Burleson could be also somebody that falls into that category, and that's what's tricky. Is like you can make the case for they need to see Burleson every day. Is he a platoon guy in the future? Are you going to play this like the Tampa Bay Rays of old, where it's everything's platoon, and kind of like I'm talking about the Brewers right now, using all the players? Are you going to play a season in future seasons and manage them like that? Or are you trying right now to go, can Gorman be an everyday dude, or is he going to just be a platoon guy? Maybe the same thing for Walker, but I don't think it's as left-right splitty with him. I think it's more just the holes in the swing. Gorman's obviously got holes in the swing and holes in the pitch recognition aspect of his game, where at times, like you said today, takes two good plate appearances, and then the other two, he's kind of flailing at the same pitch, and everybody can kind of see it coming. Being able to kind of parse that out and figure that out from his standpoint, I think, is key. For Walker, he'll strike the ball in amazing ways, whether it's on the ground, in the air, I don't care. He's impacting the baseball, but then you're starting to see him kind of get back into some of those patterns where they know where to pitch him and they know how to try to exploit his swing. And so, like, you can break it down that way. What's different with Burley is he doesn't have the holes in his swing, but to Farmhand's point, he's not barreling the baseball. He is not that guy. If he's a DH type or he's going to play some first base and you can cringe and stick him in the corner outfield if you have to, like, that's the archetype of player. And I know he would probably disagree with that. He's worked very hard on his outfield defense. But, like, as a team where you're trying to angle to be a contender and you look at the archetypes of everybody on your roster, you have to figure out where everybody fits. Burley's role ostensibly has to be somebody who hits for some pop. Now, he doesn't strike out, but because he's not a guy that's like, there are guys that they don't hit for power, but they don't strike out a lot. They can get you on base. They'll have decent plate discipline. They'll put the ball in play. Burleson's all those things, except for that's what a second baseman is. That's what a center fielder is. That's what a shortstop can be and get away with that offensive profile. Burleson has to be barreling the ball. He has to be driving the baseball to match his defensive profile, which is corner outfielder, maybe first baseman, probably DH the other days. That position needs more power involved in it. And that's where I think it's tricky, because Oli Marmol has stuck with Burleson for a long, long time and been very insistent on him. He's a big fan of Burleson's, and I understand why. As a fan of, modern baseball and a lot of the things that are done in the modern game, I also like the old school approach of, I'm going to go up there and I'm going to Mason win this, take my hacks and not be afraid of hitting with 2 strikes. Burleson doesn't strike out very often, but like there has to be that payoff eventually where he's hitting for power. And right now, I think it's been sort of a conscious decision rather than, we're going to keep kind of force feeding Burleson in that DH role to the expense of Gorman. We're choosing right now to say, all right, this is going to be a backseat moment in the season for Burleson. Gorman's going to get those opportunities though, because we need to see it from him. We kind of know what the floor is going to be for Burleson. It's not going to be as low as Gorman's floor, where he just strikes out a bunch and doesn't produce. Burleson's going to put the ball in play. Finding a way to get him to that power role is going to be interesting, obviously, especially when he's not playing very much right now.
Yeah, I think Burley's kind of the guy that at the expense of this transition year, kind of, like you said, we know what we're going to get from Alec Burleson, and
it's a compliment as much as it is a detriment,
yes. And you don't know what you're going to get from Gorman. And maybe in a season where the Cardinals are expected to win 96, 97 games, Burleson's playing a lot more than Gorman. But in a season where they've come out and made their intentions clear, Burleson's kind of the odd man out. At the end of the day, there's only 9 spots. There's only 9 spots in the lineup every day. And if you're choosing to put Gorman in it a majority of the time, the person that's most likely going to be out of it a lot is Burleson. And that's okay right now. And Burley might get hot like he did for a month or 2 last season. And then you say, okay, well, we have to play Alec Burleson. I don't care. We'll find a spot for him. Someone else will be struggling that you can sit down. And Burley will have enough at bats to do that.
Yeah, and I want to see him still here, because I think that can turn on a dime where he starts to find his swing and he is elevating the ball and driving the ball. And then you say, okay, we're going to find more spots for him. The problem is when everybody has kind of these rules around them, like we're going to give him runway, we're going to give this guy opportunities. That's where you're not pinch hitting for anybody late in games. So you're not developing that tool of Burleson either, of like, I can come off the bench, and he's done that before. He can take those swings. It's just kind of interesting. And that's why it's tricky. Like it's not perfect. And then you add another guy in Sajacy that's here right now that everybody wants to see him get chances, but it's kind of hard to do that necessarily when you're doing everything else that you're trying to do. There's a question about Herrera. I do believe there was an update on Ivan Herrera from the ballpark today, but I do want to just take a moment to acknowledge that the passing of Walt Jocketty, 74 years old, the great former Cardinals general manager who passed away today. And I know here on Sports Hub STL, we had a great show earlier this afternoon with some of the folks that worked with him and knew him well to kind of talk about his life and career and his impact on the Cardinals organization. So we certainly echo the thoughts, and Chris, I think, summed it up nicely here. All the best to the Jocketty family. Some amazing times for the Redbirds, and like a foundational person in terms of, Grant, you're a little younger than me, but in terms of like the era in which we grew up around Cardinal baseball, those teams, he was the architect of those teams and did it in ways that, like, it wasn't just passively kind of, we drafted this guy and it went well. Like, yeah, that happened. He was, here for the drafting of guys like Pujols and guys like Yachty and trading for Adam Wainwright, like all those things happening under his tenure, but also just like the big, just throw it on the table and say, we're getting Mark McGwire, like we're getting Jim Edmonds, we're getting Scott Rowland, those like big boy trades that he had a vision. Tony La Russa, Dave Duncan, those guys had a vision, and they were a great team together to be able to see that vision through. Everybody did their part. Everybody had their role, and everybody did it so well to the extent that the Cardinals, they come away with a world championship, another NL pennant during that stretch. I don't know if you have any, thoughts to add there, but just obviously all thoughts going out to the Jocketty family today. A great, great Cardinal. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, Jocketty also kind of set the groundwork for that 2011 team, obviously, as well, that won the World Series. Some of the guys that he had signed, he had drafted, he had traded for were part of that 2011 squad. And even after he left the Cardinals, kind of got the Reds back to a place of relevance, won Executive of the Year with the Reds after departing the Cardinals as well. So, yeah, sad. Did a lot in the baseball community. Huge for the Cardinals, obviously.
Yeah, another name, Chris Carpenter. I mean, acquisition of Chris Carpenter, that was a starter like, I can't stay healthy. He's got a 5 ERA in the American League. Like the ability to identify the talent and the players that became like masthead figures of the Cardinals organization at the time. just hit after hit after hit from his tenure. So again, Cardinals would not be where they are today without the influence of Walt Jocketty. And so we would be remiss if we didn't take a moment. But if you want to hear more Walt Jocketty talk from folks who actually, like I said, Grant and I a lot younger, from folks who have been in this business, in this market, covering the Cardinals, around the team for a long, long time, guys like Bernie, guys like Mike Claiborne, check out that stream a little bit lower down in the Sports Hub channel from earlier today. Definitely worth going back and watching that if you missed it earlier today. Update on Ivan Herrera, though. Let's make sure we deliver that. I'm reading this from Katie Woo's Twitter account. He caught a bullpen today and aims to begin a rehab assignment on Thursday. So sooner rather than later, we'll at least see potentially Ivan Herrera ramping up, right? If he's going to begin that assignment for next weekend, you figured Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, whether it's with Springfield, with Memphis, whatever's convenient based on the schedule, based on recently, especially where the weather is and isn't, because you don't want to send a guy somewhere and then have games get rained out constantly. They've been dealing with that in the minors. So they'll try to be strategic about that. But I would say, today's Saturday, you could see by the end of next weekend, I think we're really talking about, they'll probably give him a number of days. And for a catcher, it's different too. He'll probably DH the first day. And if it's on target for that Thursday, DH, catch, half a game, catch 6 innings and try to work his way back up. So it could be a little bit of a longer rehab stint than it might be for a different position group. But Grant, obviously the catching stuff is what it is, and we'll see how that. Pages has done a nice job. The offense has trailed off a little bit, but he's not supposed to be Ivan Herrera at the dish. What he could potentially bring, though, Ivan Herrera back to this lineup, we've seen it in the comments, could be a very, very deep lineup once they get him back.
Yeah, once they get him back, then you're starting to think, man, 9 through, win at 9 and then 1 through 5, you're feeling really good about. And anything really an addition is from 6, 7, and 8. And
which is going to be Gorman, Walker, and Vic. I mean, Gorman, Walker, Vic is a group of guys that has potential. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah. And I think with Victor Scott, a point I wanted to make, why he's great in the 8 spot is because when you have RBI spots with Wynn, Nootbaar, Contreras, Donovan, Scott getting on base is basically a double. I mean, you were always, anytime Victor Scott is on base, it's an RBI situation, even off a single. I mean, a deep single could score Scott from first, depending on the situation. He can steal a base if he's on base for 3 pitches or less. Like, Victor Scott is such a dangerous player, and anytime anyone is up with him on base, it's an RBI situation. So I think him at 8 is great. Obviously, if you can get the bat going somewhat, he'd be an incredible leadoff hitter for the Cardinals, or even a 9th hitter for the Cardinals. But I like him at 8 right now. And like you said, 6, 7, 8 will have potential for sure with Gorman, Walker, and Scott. Potential for home runs too. That's what you want, I think, out of your 6, 7 guys with Walker and Gorman, is some pop. They're going to strike out some, but every now and then you're going to get that home run, and you feel like you really, got lucky. You gained something from your 6, 7, 8 guys, which you don't always need.
Yeah, because it could be difficult. And again, it's fun to go through baseball lineups and be like, this is the role of this spot, when in reality, they're all going up, they're doing the same thing. They're trying to hit. But it can be kind of interesting to go, all right, the 6, 7 guys, they could be singles hitters, but then you're going, all right, the 8, 9 guys are supposed to drive them in. And like, sometimes it happens that way. But other times, that you do want, I think, that pocket of your lineup to have a little bit of thump, to where, if nothing else, the guys who might be more singles oriented at the bottom, where, you're talking Victor Scott, he can get doubles, obviously. Mason can get doubles, but they're sometimes both doing it with their legs, to be able to have those guys drive in guys who at least can get to second base themselves. If that's Gorman, if that's Walker, I think that can be a nice way to see the lineup flow. We've talked a lot about what went on with the Cardinals today, this weekend. We'll mention real quickly that tomorrow it's Eric Fedde against Jose Quintana, who's been very good for Milwaukee. Obviously, Cardinals fans are familiar with him. But I wanted to jump in with a couple of these thoughts before we get out of here shortly on the minor league questions we're getting. Tekoa Roby, I think, should probably end up in Memphis before too long. The one thing I would say is he had a lot of injuries going back to the year the Cardinals traded for him, and is finally feeling like he's in a good spot, it seems. So they're going to be very, very, very careful. Do I love that? No, because you could be very careful and have a guy go Cooper Jerpy and still have to have Tommy John. So it is what it is. Do I understand it? Absolutely. I think they're trying to be careful and limit his innings right now, but that's the situation. I think you'll see Roby up to Memphis at some point, and they could probably use the additional depth Although I did see, McGreevy recently doing a fine job. Graceffo had a good start for them the other day as well. This question, I assume, is referring to J.J. Weatherholt, not Westerholt, but Weatherholt has been out of the lineup. I haven't seen today for Springfield what the circumstances are, if he's going to be back in there. What I had seen was flu-like symptoms, but that's not my report. That's just what I had seen it being discussed as. And so we'll see. I think it's just a situation where he'll be back soon. But if he continues to play the way that he was before this little absence from the lineup, you'll see Weatherholt at Memphis within a number of weeks, whatever that looks like. And so we'll see. No worries on the spelling, Samuel. I was just giving you some trouble. Nothing new on Tink that I'm aware of, but I wouldn't expect him soon, would be the read that I have on that situation. And Farmhands mentioned still dealing with the flu for Weatherholt, not in the lineup today. And that's been pushing a week that he hasn't been in there. But again, get healthy. And we know that illnesses were going around like in spring training. And we talked about Mookie Betts going to Japan and losing a bunch of weight. Like Weatherholt, if he's losing 10 to 15 pounds like Mookie Betts did, it's going to take a little bit of time probably to get him back up off the mat. So nothing injury-wise that you're going long-term, what's the deal? But that's what we're awareness of is that the stomach flu can get you, Grant. That's the one thing that the Dodgers have had the food poisoning this year. The Yankees have had the food poisoning with Bellinger and Austin Wells. And so that's just what's going on here. One last one for the road, though, Grant. You see a world where Arenado was traded at the deadline. Let's say the Cardinals are 7 games below 500. You get to mid-July. What do you do then? What do you view the Arenado market as? Because he's playing well. He probably would have a market.
I think you trade him. I mean, if you're 7, they didn't trade Goldschmidt. That could have been. I don't really think they thought they were contenders last year. I don't think they thought they could even make the playoffs last year with Goldschmidt. I think it was probably the market wasn't that great. They said, we like our chances better for a miracle to make the playoffs than trade Goldschmidt. I think that their leverage is going to be higher at the deadline than it was in spring training. If Arenado keeps on this pace, they will get more, I think, at the deadline to trade Nolan Arenado than they would have in spring. And I think Arenado would want that too. I'm having a great season. Let me go and have a chance to win something. Let me take this form with the competitor, with the competing team. Now, I think if they're within even 5 games, they keep them because the Cardinals could get hot and could make a playoff run with Nolan Arenado. I think it's just about where you're at in the standings, really.
Yeah, and I think the record dictates that for Arenado's preferences as well. Like, he didn't want to go to Houston knowing that Houston's historically been a pretty good team, but he said, no, I'd rather stay here. Now, did he regret that at the end? Who knows? He would not, he wouldn't say that even if it were true, but it was one of those things where he was trying to hold out for one of those Dodgers type of spots, right? And that never materialized. But to your point, Arenado rebound season, teams have attrition, you get to July. If the Cardinals are 7 below, I agree, you trade him, and I think you've got some of those teams on his list that maybe they'll be in a different spot than they were in the offseason where they would want him. What's interesting is what if they're a game above 500, 2 games over, at 500? That's where it gets tricky because Arenado's done and said all the right things, and he is playing well. If the Cardinals surge and they're 10 games up, Arenado doesn't want to be anywhere else but here. He just wants to win. It's not like he doesn't like the Cardinals. He wants to win, and they've got competing interests this year because they're not spending money and they didn't max out their roster with the full goal being to win. They could win anyway. If they have enough talent and guys perform, they'll win anyway, and that's what everybody would be happy to see. But if they're in the middle is where not only with Arenado, but it gets interesting with Fetty. It gets interesting with Steven Matz. It gets interesting, we'll see if Michaelis has any value. It gets interesting with Ryan Helsley, for sure. I mean, if they're 3 games up, I mean, I don't know how many games that would be on July the 15th, but if they've waited that long and they're, 47 and 44, just guess, I don't know how many games they would have played, but you get my point. Mm-hmm. What do they do then? Like that's what's going to be interesting. And I think is a topic we're going to be able to talk about all season long, Grant.
Yeah, I think something interesting that you mentioned too with Arenado is part of that leverage is who's to say that Manny Machado doesn't get hurt or the Dodgers need a third baseman or the Yankees need a third baseman. Some competitor could need a third baseman and the Cardinals say, well, we have a Hall of Famer here who's having a great season. We know what you offered us in spring. We're going to up it even more now because we know what you need. You have to have Nolan Arenado win a World Series. And I think to your point too, I would like to see guys like Fetty and Helsley try to offer them something. I would hate to see them trade because I think those are guys that you could re-sign. And as you maybe take this leap into competitiveness the next few years you keep on the roster, especially Helsley. Now,
we don't
will they
know what they're going to do money-wise. Like, we haven't seen them sign. They could have. I would have argued for extending Newbar, for extending Donovan. I would have pounded the table for, like, give Mason Wynn the Christian Campbell deal. Like, tell the fans, like, here's what our core is going to be. They didn't make those decisions, and we understand why. It's not even going to be the same front office next year. So this is like a blank slate season where Chaim Bloom is then going to be able to come in concert with ownership, make those decisions. But, man, if ownership's going, we didn't have very good attendance this year, let's run it back with another low payroll year, you're going to lose a lot of these players, not just the guys who are impending free agents, but then the next track of Donovan, Newbar, where, like, they get close to free agency, and it gets to be, sign me or I'm close enough to the pot at the end of the rainbow where I'm just going to play it out and wait and go to the highest bidder. Like, I'd love to be a Cardinal. Give me that due, though. Give me that security. Ryan Helsley would be, a completely different story if the Cardinals had done that. I'm not saying right or wrong. With relief pitchers, man, it can be tricky. I just think it's very, very interesting what's going to happen from here. But everybody out there in Cardinals land, I believe, is still rooting for the Cardinals to make a surge. I think we're seeing in the games they've played at home what that can look like, and that there's reason to believe they could do it. They got to figure out the stuff on the road, and before they do that, we're not going to really be able to say, this is what's coming for the Cardinals this year. But, Grant, this has been a blast. We've gone nearly an hour. We're going to head on out here before we remind people that the post-game show on the Card Sub Postgame is brought to you by Hot Shots. You can find yours at hotshotsnet.com. And, of course, all of our content here on Sports Hub STL is brought to you by DraftKings. The crown is yours. Thank you all for tuning in. Thank you to Grant for jumping on with me. Look forward to doing some more shows with you. And that'll do it. I'm Brenden. We'll talk to you next time on Sports Hub STL.